Chapter 2. The Hospital. Rose was still giggling at the grumbling doctor's expense as the two of them entered the hospital through painfully clean glass doors. "Bit rich, coming from you. Aren't you supposed to be a doctor?"
"Not that kind of doctor. And I can't help it. I don't like hospitals. They give me the creeps."
The enormous foyer that admitted them was brightly lit and sparsely crowded, with scatterings here and there of veiled nurses in peculiar-shaped hats. A long, curving reception desk ran the length of the entire floor, and a handful of visitors milled about a circular sitting area with padded benches. Drapes paler than snow hung down from the walls around them, which towered at least 50 floors up, all the way from the polished tiles to a vaulted ceiling of silver. Everything was very clean, very white, and very quiet. There was a sterile sort of smell in the air, the acrid tinge of antiseptic, and nothing in the monastic, minimalist decor that showed even the slightest crease of wear and tear. Definitely a hospital, thought Rose, although completely unlike any she had ever been to back on Earth. She wondered how many patients a place like this could hold.
"Welcome to the Hospital of Evergreen Days,"
chimed a soothing female voice from loudspeakers set in the ceiling above them.
"This facility is owned and managed entirely by the Sisters of Plenitude. Please give generously. The Pleasure Gardens will now take visitors carrying green or blue identification cards for the next 15 minutes. Visitors are reminded that cuttings from the gardens are not permitted."
"Very smart," said Rose at length, patting down her wind-blown hair and trying to see everything at once.
"Not exactly NHS."
The doctor, however, was quick to find fault with the magnificence of the building. "No shop," he muttered, sounding ever so slightly disappointed as he, too, glanced around the cavernous lobby.
"I like a little shop."
So they still need hospitals. Rose felt a little sinking in her stomach, the way it did when she realised the future didn't quite live up to her expectations. It often surprised her, but sometimes it was just as disheartening. "I thought they'd have cured everything by 5 billion whatever."
5,023,000,023,
the doctor corrected her absently.
"The human race moves on, but so do the viruses. It's an ongoing war."
Rose mulled that over, thought about all the money raised for cancer research, AIDS charities, all the things people did to stop the march of illness and time, just as the public address system chimed in again from overhead, almost as if to echo the doctor's words.
"Hope, harmony, and health. Hope, harmony, and health."
A pair of nurses strode by them at a brisk pace, their faces veiled like the others. The Sisters of Plenitude, Rose guessed. Must be. Up close, in their flowing white robes, they looked more like nuns, arms tucked serenely into their sleeves and a starched, wing-like cornet perched over their ears.
"Excuse me," said the doctor as they passed. "Do you know how we might get to Ward 26?
But no sooner had the words left his mouth than a shrill klaxon split the air and another message sounded over the PA system.
"Emergency staff to Portal Gate 1. Duke of Manhattan in crisis. Repeat. Emergency staff to Portal Gate 1.
The doctor and Rose stopped in their tracks. Blue electricity was arcing around two freestanding metal poles nearby, and in a sudden crack of light, a hugely fat man in a moving hoverchair materialized inside the foyer. He had a gold-embroidered robe pulled over his enormous bulk and was clutching his chest in pain.
"Oh my God,"
said Rose, as two other people, a uniformed butler and a tall, bony woman in a smartly pressed black suit, were zapped into existence alongside him and rushed to his side. The two sisters hurried over to take charge.
20 glick of salsinic, quickly,
one of them said.
"He's taken that, it didn't work,"
snapped the woman in the black suit.
"Your Grace, stay with me now, don't try to speak."
Rose surged forward to help, but pulled back at the last moment, uncertain if he was contagious or not. The man's skin was turning a nasty shade of grey, and his face was contorted in pain.
What is it? What's happening to him?
But the doctor quietly sidled round her and reached up to twist the valve on one of the intravenous strips plugged into the man's hover truck. There was a hiss of escaping air, and the man's breathing eased up at once.
There we go.
Oh, sweet relief,
he gasped.
My thanks to you, sir.
The officious-looking woman rounded on the sisters.
If that equipment was faulty, we'll be taking legal action,
she said threateningly. Then she noticed Rose hovering close by and glared at her with huge, unblinking eyes.
Do you mind? Any attempt to approach His Grace the Duke of Manhattan without a consent form signed in triplicate will be met with the most extreme litigation.
All right, said Rose defensively. I was just trying to help. The woman threw her a filthy look.
Come on, Your Grace. Let's get you upstairs.
And she, the butler, and a group of nurses promptly wheeled the Duke away, leaving the doctor and Rose alone with the sister in charge. She'd lifted her veil when she'd first approached, and Rose blinked in shock at the cool, beautiful archness in her feline features.
Just a little blockage in the valve, that's all,
the doctor explained lightly.
I could tell by his heartbeat.
The sister regarded him with narrow yellow eyes. She didn't appear at all pleased by his life-saving intervention. You have remarkably good hearing.
Haven't heard anyone say thanks,
the doctor snarked and cupped his hand behind his ear, visibly listening.
No, still nothing. No, still waiting. Oh, wait a minute. No.
On any other day, Rose would have told him off for being rude, but she was still too busy gawking at the nurse's sharp, whiskered face, her smooth Siamese fur. Can I help you? Asked the sister pointedly, attempting to regain control of the conversation. The doctor broke into a smile.
Hope so. We've come to see someone, but we're not exactly sure who yet. Got an invite, Ward 26.
I see. The sister nodded slowly as he flashed the psychic paper at her. Would you know them if you saw them?
Better do, or this'll be harder than we thought.
The nurse's whiskers twitched, but she didn't pursue the discussion further. Her inscrutable yellow gaze flicked to Rose, who shivered. You'll find the lifts by the waiting area, she said shortly. I trust you will not disturb our patients. With a polite nod to them both, she swept on her way, and the hospital foyer was still and serene once more. The doctor raised his eyebrows.
Blimey, friendly staff they've got here. Probably strict about visiting hours too. If I had to guess, I'd say that grand old Duke's got a nasty case of petrified regression. You literally turn to stone.
Doctor, said Rose, but he was already tugging on her hand.
Come on, we'd better head upstairs. See you left us that message. Must be someone with a great deal of psychic energy to project something that far inside the TARDIS. No idea who that could be, or why they're in a hospital.
Doctor, said Rose again.
I mean, it's not like it's an intergalactic pager or something, is it? Urgent summons, Ward 26, paging the doctor.
Doctor, hissed Rose, clutching at his arm and pointing faintly after the nurse. They're cats. The doctor just grinned, like he'd been waiting for her to notice. Now, don't stare, it's rude. Think what you look like to them, or... He broke off and looked Rose up and down, suddenly very aware of the snug blue jacket she'd paired with her tight black jeans. Rose flushed as she felt his eyes rake over her, from head to toe and back again. Or what, doctor? She demanded. Some visitors in the foyer were turning to stare. The doctor swallowed hard and forced his eyes away to meet her frown.
Pink and yellow,
he said, quickly changing the subject.
That's where I'd put the shop. Right there.
Rose stayed rooted to the floor, goosebumps erupting all over her skin. She glanced at where he'd pointed vaguely over her shoulder, then at the strange catwomen walking around. Anything to distract herself from the possibility that the doctor had lingered on her chest a little longer than he should have. It was only when she heard him say,
Ward 26, thanks,
that Rose finally found her feet and realised the doctor had just strolled his way into a nearby lift without waiting for her to follow.
Oi!
She yelled, making a last-minute dash across the lobby and waving her arms for him to hold the doors.
Hold on, wait for me!
But she wasn't fast enough. The lift doors closed in her face.
Oh, too late.
The doctor called apologetically from the other side.
I'm going up. It's all right, there's another lift.
Rose shouted back as she reached out to hit the nearest call button.
I'll be right there. Ward 26.
The doctor's muffled voice reminded her.
And watch out for the disinfectant.
Rose frowned, unable to hear him clearly.
Watch out for what?
The disinfectant.
The what?
But the doctor's words were getting fainter and fainter by the second, until eventually he was too far away to be heard at all. Guess I'll find out, Rose muttered with a sigh. Standing there on her own, she felt uncomfortably out of her depth now she was going to have to navigate this strange new world without a Time Lord by her side. For a moment, she thought she heard that same metallic clicking noise from the cliff tops and turned her head to look. But apart from the cats in their nuns' wimples and the pronounced absence of a little shop, there didn't seem to be anything out of place. The second lift finally arrived and Rose stumbled inside, anxious to get back to the doctor. The interior, both walls and floor, was of the purest white. The hospital's green moon insignia beamed out at her from a large screen at the back, and tiny metal nozzles of some kind were positioned at regular intervals above and alongside her, as if marking the way forward. 5 billion years on, and it still looked ordinary enough for a lift, just a bit swankier. Rose looked for floor numbers to press, but there weren't any. Biting her lip, she tried to remember what the doctor had done.
Ward 26, please? Thanks.
To her great surprise and relief, it worked. The lifts appeared to be voice-activated. The doors slid obediently shut, and with a small jolt, Rose felt herself beginning to move. She couldn't help feeling a bit miffed that the doctor would just walk off and leave her like that. It was early days for them yet. This new version of him still took a bit of getting used to. He's not new, Rose told herself firmly. Just different. Different in the way he spoke, the way he smiled at her with that big, toothy grin. Different in the way his eyes would sparkle when he told her to run. Different in the way his coat flapped around him when he walked, his stride longer now, more purposeful, as though he hadn't a doubt in the universe where he was going and where he belonged. And the way he looked at her just now. Rose wondered if she was imagining things again. The doctor had never looked at her like that before, not in that way. It made something flutter deep in her stomach, like it had done during their cosy little interlude in the meadow outside, ostensibly watching the shuttles fly overhead, but actually sneaking peeks at one another. Like young lovers on a honeymoon, thought Rose, then chided herself for even thinking that. No, don't. Stop it. They were just friends. Best friends. Besides, there were other things too. Things the doctor still kept from her. Even after that mad old Christmas with the Sycorax, Rose's last memory of Satellite 5 had remained a hazy one. She'd asked the doctor about what happened, but she knew, somehow, when he'd answered, that he wasn't telling her the whole truth. She remembered looking into the TARDIS, right into the heart of the ship's console, and being almost blinded by a bright golden light. But beyond that... As much as Rose had wanted to push for answers, the very same instinct that told her the doctor was hiding something was now telling her to leave it alone.
We saved the universe, he'd said. You saved me, and I saved you. No big deal. That way we're both saved. Is that really such a bad thing?
Rose supposed it wasn't. Easier, really, to pretend, to take his word for it. That way, she could act as if that whole business with the Daleks had never even existed. Except for the headaches, and those dreams she had, and that singing. The sound of a small warning siren going off jerked Rose out of her reverie. She glanced up to see green lights flashing in all four corners of the lift, and heard the same calm female voice from the foyer echoing from a hidden speaker overhead.
Commence Stage 1 disinfection.
Stage 1 what? An icy spray suddenly burst out of the nozzles. Rose shrieked in shock as she was instantly drenched, her hair plastered to her head in seconds. Something cold and wet and liquid came bucketing down in a deluge from the walls and ceiling, leaving her sputtering in disgust as it hit her in the face, splashed down her back, and shot straight up her nose. Cold! So very cold. It stung. It stung like ice, and Rose groped blindly at the sides of the lift, scrabbling for a button that would turn the shower off. But it was useless. Her hands smacked painfully against nothing. It didn't take her very long to find out exactly what the doctor had been trying to warn her about. Not after she got a taste of it right in her mouth and had to spit it back out again. Disinfectant. Oh, she was gonna kill him. 10, 20, 30 seconds, and still the awful substance gushed in, covering Rose from head to toe, puddling under her feet. She could feel her clothes getting heavier and heavier as they soaked up the freezing cold water, and struggled to draw breath without getting a lungful of liquid. The onrushing spray was coming in from all sides, as if her entire lift car was submerged in a flood. But that wasn't possible. Rose had never counted herself as the claustrophobic type, but being stuck in this boxy space where it was literally raining indoors was seriously starting to freak her out. She banged her fists a bit desperately on the lift doors, but they were shut tight, and her sodden clothes were like a net around her now, clinging stubbornly to her skin.
Commence Stage 2 disinfection.
Just as she was about to start yelling for help, the surging downpour stopped almost as quickly as it had begun, leaving her damp and shivering. Rose barely had time to cough up water before a sudden puff of chalky white powder exploded in her face. What a way to greet visitors, she thought miserably, screwing her eyes shut and fighting back a sneeze. Definitely killing him. The green lights flashed once more.
Commence Stage 3 disinfection.
Rose flinched, half expecting to be doused again, only to squeal as she was blasted by a surge of hot air which came rushing up from vents concealed in the floor. Her hair knotted itself around her face before she could catch it, and Rose squealed again, trying to claw a few strands back into place before they all dried into a frizzy mess. But at least the blow-dry was much nicer. Unlike the first two unpleasant surprises, Rose found she actually quite enjoyed it, embracing the weightless feeling that came to her as the air fanned quickly around the compartment, curling in pleasant wisps around her body and warming her clammy skin up again. Soon, her dripping wet clothes were merely damp, and moments later, they were completely dry. Amazingly, the powder hadn't stuck to them. It was just as well she hadn't worn any makeup today. Finally feeling like she might have coughed all the water out of her lungs, Rose smoothed her hair down and straightened herself out as best she could. Well, she'd never had a shower in a lift before. Maybe she was getting the hang of this disinfectant thing after all. It would have been a whole lot easier with the doctor, but she'd make sure to get her own back the second the doors opened back up.
Commence Stage 1 disinfection.
A few floors above, the doctor seized on this excellent opportunity to rinse out any leftover bits of applegrass from earlier and test his new body's ability to hold a tune as he too was drenched in the hospital's disinfectant solution. But he was perfectly relaxed. A nice good soak didn't bother him. Humming merrily to himself, he scrubbed both hands through his hair and turned to face the spray head on. Rose would be going through exactly the same process right this very moment. It was a shame they hadn't managed to take the lift together. The look on her face would have been priceless. Never mind, it meant he'd have more time to himself to get used to the new face, his new teeth, and the hair. Oh, he liked the hair. It gave him something to boast about now that the ears were all normal-sized. The shower shut off. Then came the powder, and then the blow-dry. The doctor held out the flaps of his coat, enjoying the warm breeze that billowed around the lining of his suit as the last of the cleansing solution drained away through floor grates in the corners of the lift. Moments later, the door slid open again, and the doctor stepped out with an air of justifiable satisfaction. Hair not too messy, properly washed and rinsed, and all his clothes had managed to dry out in time. A decontamination well done, he thought. Beats always having to wash your hands. Still humming away, he strode down a pristine white hallway to commence his search for whoever had been leaving him anonymous messages on the psychic paper. That didn't happen very often. Still, it was straightforward enough. Rose hadn't caught up just yet, but it was probably best if he got a head start and gave her a couple of minutes to calm down. Especially after the disinfectant. She could be almost as scary as her mother when she got angry. Right away, Rose knew she had to be in the wrong place. She'd emerged from the lift feeling exceptionally clean and refreshed, and also somewhat relieved it was all over, ready to give the doctor both barrels, only to stutter to a halt. Ward 26, he'd told her. Well, it was a lot gloomier than expected. She'd assumed it would be as bright and polished as the foyer from earlier. She'd assumed it would at least be clean. Instead, a single derelict corridor, dark, cramped and forbidding, stretched indifferently into the distance. There were no windows to speak of, but a crude light filtered its way through nonetheless, just bright enough for her to see.
Hello?
Rose called, but there was no reply. She had to be somewhere deep underground, a cellar of some kind, probably beneath the hospital itself. All around, she could make out the outlines of dusty medical machines that might have once been used by the wards upstairs, but now stood abandoned amid a clutter of broken plumbing and scrap metal. A steady drip, drip, drip came from the narrow ceiling of cooling pipes above her head, leaking onto an unfinished flagstone floor. Even the air itself was damp and musty, dragging thick into her lungs. Not exactly what you'd call sanitary. So how in the world had she ended up all the way down here? Were these the ancient foundations of a previous hospital, maybe, built by those cat people many years before?
The human child is clean.
Rose jumped at the nasally voice. Further down the grimy hallway, she could see a thin, gaunt little man, dressed like a surgeon, his hands clasped submissively over the front of baggy white scrubs. He had an odd blue cap perched on his head, and a pattern of what looked like henna tattoos etched into his dreadfully pale skin. The strange, swirly designs reminded Rose of the amoeba pictures in the biology textbook she used to doodle over back in comprehensive school, in lieu of actually reading it. They told her he wasn't exactly human. Rose dithered on the spot for a moment.
I'm looking for Ward 26?
She asked uncertainly.
This way, Rose Tyler.
The man's speech had a soft, wispy quality to it, not unlike an Irish brogue, as he called back to her.
How do you know my name?
The man didn't answer that. His bright, staring eyes gave her a once-over she didn't like.
My mistress wishes to speak with you. Oh, is she a patient here? Mistress has been indisposed for quite some time. I'm sorry,
said Rose, and meant it.
Do you want me to call a nurse?
But the little man was already running off at a sudden trot down the dark passage, with his shoulders hunched up around his ears, like a frightened rat scurrying back to its nest. Rose stared after him apprehensively. He looked harmless enough, but this didn't feel right. This didn't feel right at all. She could tell this place hadn't been used in a long time, yet here was this strange, creeping thing waiting to greet her, who somehow already knew who she was. Which could only mean someone had lured her down here on purpose. Never a good sign. The man had stopped at the far end of the passageway and was looking back, clearly expecting her to follow. Rose hesitated, thoroughly spooked. She could leave. She could leave right now, head straight back up in the lift and find the doctor. Or she could follow this stranger into the shadows. Though she hated to admit it, this stooped little creature and his mistress, whoever that was, had piqued her curiosity. Out of the corner of her eye, Rose spotted a slender metal rod lying on the floor among the detritus. Slowly, trying not to make a sound, she bent down to pick it up and gripped it loosely in her hand like a club. Just in case. Then, feeling very much like a mouse walking into the path of a hungry cat, Rose cautiously allowed herself to be led away. Every now and again she would glance back over her shoulder, almost as if expecting the doctor to pop out of nowhere, ready to have a good laugh at whatever she had got herself caught up in this time. But there was no one else down here. She was on her own. That clicking noise was all around her now, the tick-tick-tick of tiny things on metal legs scuttling into dark corners. Like spiders. This felt like a terrible idea.